So just pretend everything you see is beautiful. Because if not, I will blame it on the lighting. All right, so I'm going to take you through and just share the highlights of what I have released new with Reinker here at Creativation 2019. There's different product categories there. Don't all go together, all right? But I just want to hit the highlights. The first thing, probably the most basic, are distress colors of mini archival ink pads. Now, archival ink is an oil-based waterproof ink. It's permanent ink, and the nice thing about having it in distress colors now is that any of my backgrounds or anything that I like to do with distress inks or oxides, I have those colors that have that same kind of vintage vibe, right? It's also great when you have a waterproof ink if you do any type of mixed media work, whether you're working with not only water-based inks, but even solvent inks like alcohol inks. An oil-based ink works really well. Sometimes in the permanent ink world, they're solvent-based and solvent reacts with solvent. So that is why I've always loved Reinker's archival ink, and the fact that they finally allowed me to have some colors of distress. I'm happy with my 12. I love 60, but I'm happy with this. It's just really nice. And I think the smaller size ink pad is pretty much like today's maker. You know, they'd rather have more colors, you know, enough space. But down here, just so you can see on the swatches, I've just stamped out just to show the difference between the distress ink of that and the distress archival ink of that. So the colors, did a great job color matching, even though they're completely different formulations. But you can see here that when stamped on watercolor paper and sprayed with water, the distress ink, of course, is going to do its reaction and wicking, and the archival is permanent. So that's really, really nice when it comes to just basic stamping. Then other things in distress, of course, are Oxide Spray. And the joy of this product is that we now have a sprayable version of this very cool kind of dye pigment fusion. And when it comes to working with a spray ink, these are great for art journals, mixed media projects, much larger things. And there's oftentimes that spray inks do things that ink pads can't. Ink pads are great for blending, they're great for stamping, and they're great for some backgrounds. But if you have large areas, to actually ink an entire journal page with a blending tool and an ink pad is going to take a lot of time. But having a fluid version is cool. And what makes me even more excited about an Oxide Spray is anytime we have something fluid, obviously they need to fill it with a liquid. But if you know anything about distress oxide, let me just grab an ink pad. This is a water reactive product, but it oxidizes when it gets wet. So it's well beyond just blending, it actually reacts. So when we wanted to spray, they couldn't just add water, because then all of the color would just oxidize right in the bottle and all you'd be spraying out is white. So it took them a while to figure that out, but I'm super happy with the formulation, and I'll get to demoing that as well. And then, of course, we have a lot of new things in the world of alcohol inks. We have a new product called Alcohol Pearl. And what the alcohol pearls are, they are a pearlescent alcohol ink, which means it is a dye that has a pearl colorant actually fused to the dye. When I say that, because if you're familiar with alcohol inks at all, we know that alcohol inks are translucent colors, and we have alcohol mixatives, which are those pigments that are designed to kind of separate from one another. When we use the inks in the mixative, they create those cool marbleized backgrounds. This is not a mixative. This is an actual colorant. So when you use it, that ink and that pearl is fused on the surface. So you have this beautiful sheen, this beautiful luster of product. Now, the great thing about alcohol pearls, they can be used with your regular alcohol ink. So they can be used on that background simultaneously, and they won't kind of separate against one another. So you can use them to create beautiful swirls of color if you wanted to have some pearlescence and then kind of some areas that are not pearlescent, and you could still use this with a mixative to achieve that same effect. So instead of an either or, we've pretty much given that maker a whole nother kind of ink to work with. Painters that want to add that little bit of highlight, people that are doing backgrounds that just want it to be a little bit more kind of, I don't know, it has a beautiful luster to it. That's the only way I can describe that color. So here you can see on these swatches, these are the alcohol pearls. So each one has its own color of pearl, and that's what makes it even more unique. Instead of just adding a white pearl, each color has its own color of pearl, and that's what makes that consistent layer. And what makes it also very innovative, I think, is whenever you add a pigment to a dye, you get this color swatch. These two samples right here, and if I'm not hitting what little light we have, you're welcome to pick this up and kind of get a better look. This one right here is alcohol ink with the pearl mixative. So you can see when the light hits this, that pearl mixative whites it out, because pigment dominates dye. So even though we've applied these in layers, as soon as it dries, that pigment is always going to rise to the top. so it really whites out the color. It's still beautiful, but it's pearl. The alcohol pearls, though, you can see, they don't do that. They just provide that consistent, beautiful shimmer. So this is a really important thing. If your customers, I mean, I would recommend just doing that right away on one color, just to show people, like, because I mean, when I did Facebook Live, they're like, wait a minute, you have pearl mixative, I can just put pearl with my alcohol and can get the same thing. It's like, I thought the same thing until I used it and realized that, you know, whatever they did to get that pearl, that shimmer to bond to the ink is really, really amazing. So those, of course, are the colors. Now we also have some new substrates, and I think that's always exciting when we have new products, that we have new surfaces to put them on. And in the alcohol ink world, you know, Yupo is one of those things that when we partnered with Yupo to create that synthetic plastic paper just in smaller card sizes, everyone in the card making world is like, what is that? And this has been around forever. And I think that is what inspired us to go on the search to find other things, because as makers, we just like other surfaces to work on. So we have 3 new paper surfaces in the alcohol ink cardstock. We have a black matte, we have a brushed silver, and we have a silver sparkle. And I really encourage you, I'll pass these around to kind of feel them. This black matte cardstock is wild. I'll start them over here. It's kind of like this is just a regular cardstock, but the black matte almost feels rubbery. You'll see when you feel it. It's a great matte for a card. It's very, very thick. You can use alcohol inks on it, but if you do, you have to work with the Snowcat Mixative. You have to give that white foundation. And if you're here later today, I think Sharon will be painting with it, so it's pretty awesome. Did you check it out? She's back tomorrow. Absolutely very cool to work with the black cardstock. But these other two, what I love about this brushed silver and the silver sparkle is the brushed, well, it's kind of a little vintage. Usually with metallic cardstocks, we have that really high reflection of a foil card. This is just that brushed metallic. It almost looks a little pearl, but you can stamp on this, do your alcohol inks on it, and it's not going to permeate through that surface. Okay, you can stamp with your archivals, that sort of thing. This silver sparkle, very, very cool, because it is a very soft, very sparkly paper. And what's interesting, and I think I don't know what I do. Here we go. Here's some swatches. So I had a product called Deco Sheet a couple years ago, which is a sparkly vinyl, completely different than that. You can see that the particle size is much smaller. This was a sticky back vinyl. This is cardstock. So the nice thing about this is that when you ink it, you get unbelievable sparkly color. So the alcohol inks react just like they do on any other slick paper, but we still get all of that movement. It's an embossable cardstock, so when you emboss it, it doesn't crack, it doesn't break. It really maintains its integrity as that sparkly paper. It's just a really, really nice substrate when we're working with alcohol inks. And I think the papers are super, super unique. Now, in addition to papers, of course, we follow the art world very, very closely. And as much as people love Yupo and they do beautiful paintings and things on it, we found a lot of people, when they create art, don't know what to do with it after that. They're trying to figure out how to mat it, how to frame it. And when we were at the art show, we met a vendor called Masterpiece, who does a lot of canvas boards and art boards for the art world. And he had this substrate and brought it over to me. He's like, I have this stuff that I don't know what to do with it, because you don't really paint on it because it's kind of a vinyl-y thing, but these alcohol inks you have, I think, might work. So just like we do with Yupo, we partnered with Masterpiece to bring this hardcore art panel. And what this hardcore is, it's an actual wood, it's a wood core, it's an MDF wood that is laminated with this vinyl. So the vinyl's not peelable, right? It doesn't peel off. It is fused to the board on both sides. And as you can see here, you can do all of your painting, all of your mixed media on this board. And then you have art. You can pop it in a frame if you want, or it could just be finished art. And it is laminated on both sides, so if you were a painter, you could work on both sides if you want, but all of the mediums work on this. I won't say that it's exactly like Yupo, because I don't believe there's anything like Yupo other than Yupo, but because it is kind of that vinyl-y surface, it has a slight texture, so you can see that kind of little bit of almost a little orange peel texture, but you can do your alcohol lift ink on that, you can stamp with your archival inks on that, you can do your blending solution. All of those inks really blend well to the surface. It doesn't go underneath the vinyl. So I think a lot of artists are going to really enjoy these panels. Now, these panels are sold in mini packs, little 4x4 panels, also 5x7 panels, and then multi-packs of squares and rectangles. So they're just cool. So I have this out, you can like pick it. click it, hide it, I don't know, whatever you're gonna do. But yeah, it's very cool. It's wood, yeah, and I tell people that like it's wood because of course as makers we're like, ooh, we're gonna die cut that into other shape. No, you are not going to. You may think you want to because we have a lot of paper-based board. This is wood. Yeah, when you get it, you're like, okay, this is, yeah, that's why we said it is. That is why I wanted that name. I'm like, this is hardcore. It is a hardcore, but it's also hardcore. You can't, because really as makers we're like, oh, it's chipboard, please. I can do this. I'll get a knife and just cut that. Like, no, you won't. All right, so let's demo just a little bit and just share with you kind of what this stuff does. So we'll start with an oxide spray. An oxide spray, the cool thing, because it is that dye and pigment, having it in a spray works really, really well. Now, because this particular medium has both dye and pigment, you need to shake it up very, very well. The label will tell you to shake it side to side to kind of get that stuff to mix. I prefer to remove the clear top, wrap it in a paper towel, and shake it up, right? Because sometimes you might get some leakage out of the top of that sprayer. And that's going to mix it up really well. We'll just do a few colors. Let's see, we'll take a little cracked pistachio. And it's not a mica spray, so it's not like I'm worrying about the sprayer clogging. What I really want to do is make sure that I'm getting that kind of dye and pigment floating around, okay? The bottles, I mean, they do kind of look a little weird because you can see that dye and pigment in there that separates, but as soon as you shake it up, it just kind of mixes together. Now we can work on watercolor cardstock, tags, anything porous for this particular product. I'll do a little bit here. Normally I'd want to work in the splat box, but I said it's not going to happen for me, I'm telling you. What you'll see as I'm spraying this out is because it is that dye and pigment, as you layer color, one color is going to cover the other color. Okay, so normally if we were working strictly in dye inks, right, everything would maintain that same color, and you can use it in conjunction with your spray stains. You really can. It doesn't work as like a mixative, but if you add just a regular dye to this, you will get some great separation. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of water to start. Not going to do a full-on mist. So I just want to show you what it's going to do on this background.
Looks like a patina.
It's cool, yeah. And when it dries, it will oxidize, okay? It's gonna oxidize even more, so just gonna keep adding water. Anytime you wanna get a reaction of any medium, right? It's all about when you add the water, right? When you add it right away, excuse me, when it's just a dye, you'll get almost a watercolory wash. When you add it to dry ink, you get almost a bleaching or a fading of it. So I always tell people, when you work with a medium, just different stages, add some water, because that is going to provide a whole different effect to your background. But you can see on this one, see how it's drying, starting to oxidize, but we're getting that amazing, amazing blend just from spraying it. All right, let's go in. Just gonna kind of dab this off because I don't want to wait for it to dry completely. That's gonna lift it down to the base, which I happen to love. And we have a very, very quick oxidized background. Now, with oxide, because we've got that concentration of dye, that's what's really providing that bold, vivid color. And every time we add more water, it is going to continue to oxidize. So it has exactly the same properties as your ink pads. It's just more intense. You get more coverage very, very quick. Any of your ink that remains here, you can do the same thing. We can go in with some water. We can spray that right on our media mat. You can take any kind of cardstock that you want. I'm just gonna do something porous, do the back of wood grain. And as you pick that up, you're gonna still get that great layerability with this ink, because again, we're dealing with dye and pigment. So that's the thing that I will say when I'm working with this. It has probably the biggest learning curve for me because I'm used to working with the spray dye, or I'm used to kind of blending with pigments, but there's so much colorant going on from a spray bottle that the first time I did it, I'm like, oh, I got this. I was spraying all this. I had way more color than I could even control. It just, I couldn't even lift it off. So I think as a maker, this is great on wood, this is great on canvas, this is great on fabric, because it provides really great coverage. If you do any kind of wood like vignette boxes or chipboard, it creates that instant pickling on the wood, because the dye is going to go in and stain the wood, and the pigment is going to sit on top of the wood. So if you happen to be by ideology, check out a lot of the vignettes that kind of look all shabby chic. They're just sprayed with the oxide spray. So it's pretty awesome. All right, we're going to set that aside. I'll just let it do its thing, and then I'll quickly go into pearls. So far, so good? Okay. You don't have like oh. do I know in my brain? I'm like, I know, like any minute someone's gonna come and be like 5 minutes. I said I wish we had like big clocks so I can see that timer and then I would really know. All right, so the alcohol pearls. These guys, I mean, what was really fun about creating something completely unique, let's face it, alcohol inks are just, they are hot. People are using them for painting and resin pouring and all sorts of backgrounds. So to have a completely new medium that doesn't even replace that, it's a whole nother me too. And I wanted it to be very, very different and stand out all on its own. So in addition to alcohol pearls, I thought the names needed to be really fun and crazy and cool. So we have names like Envy and Deception. I know, what was I channeling? And Splendor and Enchanted and Alchemy and Sublime, because I think it needs to evoke a feeling. You know, this is one of my favorites. This is kind of like mushroom. It's called Smolder. And we have Mineral. Yeah, it's a whole cosmetic world, I have to say. That really inspired the color palettes. I'm like, what am I going to name these things? And yeah, those names just really, they're pretty awesome. So just to show you, and sadly the lighting is probably not going to pick it up as well, so I will be demoing today. You can come by and see it. But just seeing that ink go onto a surface, whether we put this on straight or whether we use our ink tool, you're going to see this pearl just kind of almost bubble or sizzle onto the surface. Okay? Yeah, you see a little bit. It's way better when we actually have lights turned on.
What paper is it?
This one is Yupo, but you can still use it on alcohol ink cardstock. You can still use it. See, they heard me. They turned it on. Perfect timing. Yeah, you can really work on any substrate, but I will tell you, in the world of alcohol ink, that alcohol ink cardstock glossy paper is probably my least used now, simply because although it's beautiful, you don't get any do-overs. Right? Anything synthetic like this hardcore panel or Yupo, you can keep playing and playing and playing, and it will replace one another. So you can see as I drip that on, see kind of that sizzling that's happening? That pearl that just kind of shimmers away? That's really unique about this product, because that pearl, as you can see, it is not pushing to the side like a mixative. It's just staying on to the top of that. Now these backgrounds, done super, super simple. That would be taking any kind of ink, stamping them onto the substrate. That's exactly how I did this. Stand it up, take your blending solution, squirt your blending solution on there, and you're done. So if you want to see this, I'll demo this right when the show opens at 9 o'clock. It's really, really cool to see. So that is just a quick overview of what is new in the world of Reinker. Pretty neat, huh? Yeah, a lot of new stuff, but all very different. But I think really whenever it comes to releasing product, especially for makers, having just a little something new in each thing keeps everything relevant, right? I think if I just did alcohol ink, then everyone's like, okay, alcohol ink, forget distress, right? Or if you do distress, it's like, okay, forget alcohol ink. So it's really important as a designer to, you don't have to overwhelm anything, but just a little bit. And it's so different that, again, it's not going to compete with what you're already selling, what they're already using, what you're already making. It's just something of, wow, I can use this with my oxide pads, or I can use this with my spray stains. Dang, now I can stamp on everything that I've done with these inks, right? I can stamp over my collage medium, and now this, wow, I think this takes the alcohol ink world to a whole nother level, because there's just nothing like it, which I love. So, any questions? No? I'll point out one thing, because no one asked, but just waiting for it. It was over here. But Lift Ink, right? So Lift Ink is something that we released. Sure, thank you. Lift Ink is something we released last year, and one thing to understand about these new alcohol pearls, Lift Ink doesn't want to lift a pearl completely, right? Because this is designed to lift the translucent colors. It doesn't lift mixative. So if you are using alcohol pearls on your background, Lift Ink will not lift it. But if you use pearls and you use some inks, when you go to lift it, you'll get kind of a little bit here and a little bit that's not lifted, right? So just kind of keep that in mind if you're doing backgrounds. If you're like, you're using all the pearls, you're like, oh, I'm gonna use that new Lift Ink on Yupo, and oh, nothing happened. Remember, this still has pigment in it, so it's really important to do a little education on that when you're working with it. But I couldn't be happier with everything, because I think it's just enough to create that buzz in all categories. Especially this one, I'm just not gonna lie. This, I'm not kidding you. 5 years I asked for these. 5 years I wanted Distress Archival. That's what I wanted. I'm like, I just need vintage colors to stamp with. That's what I like. Because I think a lot of times if you try to do a bright color on a dirty background, that color just completely gets wiped away. So really, really happy. So, where are you guys off to next? Did they tell you which way to rotate? You're gonna get to see the lovely Diane.